Good evening. My name is Dave Bach, a resident of Enfield, and we're here tonight for a candidates forum for the Democratic primary for the 8th District County Legislature seat. We're joined by our two candidates, Vanessa Greenlee and Bob Lynch, running for the Democratic Party slot on the ballot this fall. Before we start, let me thank the Enfield Democratic Committee for setting this up. Ted Crane, who's in the background, our tech guy making this happen. Mark Sadovnik, who's doing the timing for us. And of course, the candidates. The format tonight will allow each candidate an opening statement of 3 minutes, followed by a question and answer period, at which time they each get a minute and a half to answer the questions. And then there'll be a closing statement by each candidate for 2 minutes. For the questions, I want to thank a number of Enfield residents for submitting those to the committee. As you can imagine, some of them dealt with the same topics as others, and tried to capture the spirit of as many of them as we could. So if you're one of the people listening who submitted a question and you don't hear exactly what you sent in, I'm sure you will hear something approaching the issue that you wanted to have the candidates address. And we're concentrating on issues that would be pertinent at the county level. So I think we'll have the opening statements, and with the awesome power invested in me tonight, we'll start with Vanessa.
Okay, the awesome power invested in you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. I'm Vanessa Greenlee, and I'm honored to be running to represent our district, District 8, on the county legislature. For my introduction, I'll share with you a bit about my journey. So I grew up in a rural area in Southern Appalachia. Race relations were and are very real to me. My parents divorced when I was in 2nd grade. It was not a friendly parting. And my hometown is a carpet milling town with many immigrant families. I learned to speak Spanish as a young person porque mi padre me inculcó la importancia de poder hablar con la gente en su propio idioma, because my dad taught me, instilled in me the importance of being able to meet people where they are and talk to them in their own language, in their own words. As a young adult, I struggled with mental illness. I grew up in an evangelical tradition and had trouble integrating my curiosity about the world with the messages of my early faith. With some really good care and a lot of love, I got better. Marriage took me on a journey around the country. I've taught English for speakers of other languages in Georgia, language arts in Illinois, Spanish in Texas, and STEM communication in Tennessee. I've worked with businesses in public-private partnership to train students for emerging careers. And now my husband and I have made our home here in District 8. We have 2 boys in elementary school. I'm in a 2nd career now, this one in agriculture, where I manage projects with large budgets from federal agencies, working with people to come together on issues surrounding food security and climate change. I'm running to serve you, my neighbors in District 8, because I, like you, value rural living. I think we're at a very pivotal moment in terms of adapting to climate realities and in letting equity drive our decision-making. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you tonight, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Bob?
Good evening. I want to thank the Enfield Democratic Committee, the Tompkins County Democratic Committee, Dave Bach, and also Vanessa for joining us tonight. It should be an interesting night with good conversation, and we should be able to help inform the voters as to our relative stance on the issues. My name is Bob Lynch. I am a member of the Enfield Town Board, and I am running for the Tompkins County Legislature so as to return the county legislature to its roots. Let me explain a little bit. I followed the county legislature now for a half century. I was a news reporter back in the 1970s when the legislature was known as the Board of Representatives, and Harris Dates was its chair. And way back when we had first was Jim Ray, but before him was Harry Kerr as our local representatives here from Newfield and Enfield. I know the legislature's legacy, its traditions, its history, its guiding principles. It's had a tradition of transparency over the years, and I've welcomed that, and I have appreciated that. But somehow in the past several years, something's changed. I don't know. I don't think any one person is to blame, certainly not our own Representative Dave McKenna, but something has changed, and maybe it's systemic. New legislators have arrived over the years, a new county administration flexed its muscle, and a half century of open government seems at times forgotten. I want to change that. I think there are too many closed meetings, too much that's discussed and decided behind closed doors and then presented to us, the voters and taxpayers, as a fait accompli. Now, I'm not an activist. I am what I call an inclusionist. That's a word I coined. Activists outside the government are good. They can move mountains. They can, like Martin Luther King did, they can help eliminate racial discrimination. But when they get into the powers of government, they can try to drag people along to their own particular ideology. I want to try to avoid that. I want to keep us moving on the right path. I want to try to bring people in. I believe in old-fashioned representative democracy, bottom-up democracy, people democracy. And I want the people to have the control. And I am a Joe Biden centrist. I try to govern from the middle. I've tried to be an inclusionist, bringing Enfield government to the middle. And I'd like to do the same for Tompkins County. I'd like to work with my colleagues on the legislature to fashion responsible solutions for the future. And I think I've got the ability, and I think I've got the experience to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So I'll start the questioning with a little history. I actually predate Bob in my memory of the county government. And before the days of the representatives, there was a board of supervisors. And the board of supervisors was a time when each town had its own representative at the county level. Ever since a court case mandated districts of equal population, Enfield's been split in half. Half the town represented by the ostensibly the majority Newfield representative, and the other half, the northern half on the Ulysses side. Now, an optimist would say that Enfield now has 2 reps on the board. The pessimistic view is that because Enfield residents are a decided minority in each district, we no longer have a true Enfield representative at the county level. So my question is, how would you ensure that Enfield's concerns get a fair hearing in the county legislature? And in your answer, please include an example of an issue that's particular to Enfield within District 8. And Bob, we kick it off with you.
Well, first, I would consider myself a representative of Enfield and Newfield. And when I would consider Enfield, I would think of all of Enfield, not just Enfield from the Route 79 center line south. So I think I would approach that way. I would try to attend every Enfield Town Board meeting, at least on a monthly basis, their regular meetings, and do the same in Newfield. I would try to be a good representative, even if my colleague Ann Corman was in a Enfield Town Board meeting giving her report. I might then piggyback onto her report with my report, and hopefully we would work as a team. In terms of a particular problem unique to Enfield, it's hard to segregate Enfield from Newfield, and because there's so much similarity in the fact that it's a rural community in both cases. And I, at the moment, can't think of one thing that would be unique to Enfield that would exclude Newfield. I found the people to be much the same, with much the same values. I think what we want to do, among other things, is make sure that our policing reform is done so as to reflect rural values. I think that's important, and that's one thing I would try to do to serve both communities.
Thanks, Bob. Vanessa?
Thanks. You know, I really have to agree with you, Bob, on that one, that it is difficult to separate and piece apart the needs and the values of Newfield from Enfield. You know, when you drive through our district, you know, you go, when you're on a road, you go through, you're in Enfield and then you're in Newfield, and then you're in Enfield and then you're in Newfield. And the two towns are quite intertwined in many ways like that. I think to the question about, you know, how do you ensure that Enfield gets a fair hearing? And as we think about the having two representatives on the legislature, I get that issue. You know, compounding that, you've got the students of Enfield going to different schools at the elementary level, and you know, it's difficult to get a good census count of the demographics particular to Enfield because of zip code issues. So I can certainly appreciate why that's a concern. I think one of the things to do, again, as Bob mentioned, has to do with regular communications. I noticed that there are opportunities to have more I'm a professional communicator, and so I think there's more opportunity to have communications infrastructure, some newsletter e-list building, more forums regularly for back and forth for listening and speaking. Particularly to issues about Enfield, there's a couple of exciting community development initiatives that I think could be brought to the legislature's attention. And I'll wrap with these. The new skate park under consideration, and the new library under consideration at the community center. And I'll get to those more perhaps in a future answer. Thank you.
Okay. And this actually, some of the things you mentioned in this answer pertain somewhat to the next question. And Vanessa, this is yours for starters. If elected, you'll need to collaborate with two town boards, plus Ann Corman, the representative from the northern half of Enfield. And that sort of collaboration requires good communication and also the ability to play well with others. And so our question is, can you give us some examples of how you have met those two objectives in other activities you've been involved in?
Sure. So if you want to know just about me personally and my history and my professional history, I think in terms of bridging. So one of the reasons that I became an ESL teacher in my hometown of Dalton, Georgia, was that I really wanted to help be a bridge and integrate two different communities that spoke two different languages. Another point in that regard has to do with my parents' divorce, right? Like if you're a child of divorce and it hasn't been friendly, you kind of get the need to code switch, to look for consensus there, to be a peacemaker. And I took those earlier experiences in my life, and they've been an asset to me professionally growing up. As so often adversity can do for us, at the end of the day, it's given us something rich that we can work with. A case study from my professional history is that, so prior to my previous work with the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, I was working for a large project funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And there was some research going into some cowpea, what we here call in the US black-eyed peas, to try to make it resistant to some pests. And there was disagreement with the major players on the ground about how to get that cowpea into the hands of subsistence farmers. And the Gates Foundation asked if there was anybody on the team that could help bring people together. And my name was put forth, and I facilitated a process and a conversation that ultimately got us where we needed to be in terms of the goal of releasing that the data about that product.
Okay, thank you. Bob, same question.
I don't come up with all the good ideas, but when I hear a good idea, I go and run with it. Case in point, asymptomatic testing for COVID-19. True story. I think it was last July 4th, I was sitting at the dinner table with my sister, Marcia, the former public information officer for the county. And we talked about people with who don't have symptoms are having to pay money, maybe $99 a piece, to get tested to find out if they have COVID-19. Shouldn't the county do that? Shouldn't the county with its excess money do that? So I went to the county legislature and I made a proposal. Why don't you take money out of the contingent fund and use it to fund asymptomatic testing? I collaborated with Anna Kellis, who was then a member of the county legislature. Anna and I are friends. We thought like-mindedly on that, and we both advanced it. And guess what? Asymptomatic testing was eventually approved by the legislature. Then this spring, there was talk from one of our seasoned representatives on the legislature, Mike Lane. Why can't people get on a registry for vaccination? I thought it was a great idea. So I took Mike Lane's idea and I turned it into what's called the Enfield resolution, which was a resolution urging everybody, including Governor Cuomo, to allow us to have a vaccine registry. Sure enough, after a little prodding, the county established a vaccine registry. 2 victories. Thank you.
Thanks. Bob, you'll lead off on this next question. As you're probably aware, large areas of Enfield lack broadband access and or are cell phone dead zones. This impacts all aspects of our social and economic life for our residents, and the ill effects have been acutely felt by many of our rural students who struggled with school during the pandemic. So I'd like you to give us some specifics of how you would address the digital divide.
Well, for the first thing, I had hoped one of my grand plans was to establish a Goal 2021 program that by the end of 2021, all of Enfield would be served by cell phone service and with broadband. Well, COVID-19 got in the way, and we know what happened last year. Everybody got behind the curve. So maybe 2021's goal is now 2023, whatever. But I am sitting on the TCOG, Tompkins County Council of Governments Broadband Committee, and we're working on it. There are some glitches, some bumps in the road, and I don't have time to discuss them, but they involve transparency and everybody playing openly so that everybody knows what's going on. But we hope to be able to identify and then extend broadband cables to a larger part of our communities. Now, as I said, there are some bumps in the road here, and we're still working them out. But in any event, I would like to have this effort, which is being coordinated by the county government, and most of the towns have contributed $5,000 toward that objective, to have universal broadband coverage to our areas. And cell service is a lot better since that tower went up in Enfield Center. And that has helped a lot. I can actually call out from outside the food pantry now, where I couldn't do that before.
Okay, thank you. Vanessa?
Yeah, everybody's got to admit broadband's an issue that we can all get behind. Everybody wants to have better access to broadband in Newfield. The students and teachers deserve it. Our small businesses trying to get by and do e-commerce deserve it. Seniors who are trying to connect socially for the first time in this pandemic via remote channels. Everybody needs access to this modern day technology. And the question is how to get there. I am really encouraged and excited about what I'm hearing about this broadband study that we're involved in that has cost $80,000, and the results are due here in January. What we're doing is we're combining efforts. We're bridging onto an existing study in 5 counties southwest of us with the Southern Tier network. They've formed a nonprofit, and they've a model that I think just has a whole lot of promise for being able to expand into our area, because they're going about things differently. And what they're doing, and what the study that we're involved in right now has the capacity to allow us to do, is to have a true map now that our county's funding, to understand where the gaps are, where the coverage areas are not, and to map that out, have a design and delivery model for where we need to lay this middle mile fiber, this dark fiber. There's a potential for this to be nonprofit, organized, municipally owned, and that the service providers are going to be leasing the wire. What does that mean for you and me and for taxpayers and our home level? It means that money going to pay the lease then be used to buy more publicly owned fiber. And you can't do that without the map.
Thank you. And since we're alternating, you'll lead off with the response to the next question. Do you support the expansion of sustainable energy installations, solar and wind, in rural towns?
This is a great question, and actually at the heart of the issues that that I think about a ton, being someone who's trying to advance green energy and our security of our food systems and our food supply. So there is a tension. There is a tension, right, between wind and solar installation, our rural character, our landscape is changing, and being able to hit those 2030 targets of the CLCPA, the New York State Leadership and Climate Protection Act. We know that we can't hit those targets without additional offshore wind sources, without having solar, without having some more solar installations. The question is, in my mind, is in the balance and in the method that those decisions are made. So right now, about 80% of the solar installations that are going in, town boards, such as the one that Bob serves on, are hearing about these agreements for permission after the developer has already been in conversation with the landowner. And what the problem with that model is that you're not able to distribute at a state level. And we're in the solar belt of New York, the solar installation belt of New York. We're in prime territory. You're not able to make informed decisions about the balance between prime agricultural land and where those solar installations sit, unless you have part of a broader strategic approach. And I will be involved at the state level to try to get us in those conversations. Thank you.
Bob?
I support alternative energy. I support solar. Wind is a little dicier, and we in Enfield have decided to take wind energy and park that in the corner for the moment. So let's talk about solar. I support the solar projects. And we have a new one that we are proposing, that has been proposed, that we are discussing in Enfield. It's by Norbit Solar out of Rochester, New York. They're proposing a 15 megawatt solar farm off Applegate Road. I'd like to see it happen. I hope it does happen. We on the Enfield Town Board are trying to make it happen. However, we've got to make sure that the solar developers pay their fair share. There's what they call a pilot agreement. It's payment in lieu of taxes. And that's how generally we tax a solar farm. And it goes through the county's industrial development agency. And right now there is a disagreement between the Enfield Town Board and the industrial development agency as to how much of a pilot should be paid by Norbit. You know, I worked up the math, and according to what the IDA wants to have happen, Norbit would only be paying the town of Enfield 12% of what an average homeowner would pay as far as a tax rate is concerned. That's not fair. For a $20 million project, it's got to be more than that. So as long as developers pay their fair share, I want to encourage new solar farms in this community.
Thank you. Next question goes to Bob first. Rural poverty is pervasive in District 8. Do you favor efforts to create a living wage policy in the county? And if so, how would you pursue that goal?
Well, I think poverty has a lot more tentacles, if you will, than just a living wage. I volunteer weekly at the Enfield Food Pantry, and these are wonderful people who come through our doors, but many of them don't have enough money to put food on the table. And we've got to make sure that they have adequate nutrition. That's what the food pantry does. In terms of a living wage, New York has minimum wage laws, which I understand will, in time, come close to a living wage. And we should encourage that. What I don't want to see happen is for Tompkins County to set a higher minimum wage than adjacent counties, because what it will do is it will drive business and commerce to those adjacent counties, and it will not necessarily create more employment. You can't raise the minimum wage so high that businesses stop hiring and start firing, because then nobody makes much money.
Thank you. Vanessa?
The county has stepped up in leadership to create a living wage requirement for county affiliated positions. I think that's a great first step. Living wage legislation is a state level issue, and so we can set a leadership position here. But also we have to look at a household's complete package of expenses. So there's the money coming in and the money coming out. And I'm concerned about the cost of healthcare for all families, or access to healthcare, not having it. That's another piece of the puzzle that I think we need to be talking about. These events don't live in isolation. When a family's spending between 25 to 30% of its income on health insurance, something's not right. And so in addition to supporting living wage, I support passage of the New York State Health Act.
Okay, thank you. And Vanessa will lead off with the next question. What's your position on the city and county's new direction in public safety?
Sure, thanks for raising that question. I have family in law enforcement, and I have friends who have been coming in from out of town and have been experiencing some issues interacting with public safety here in our county. And I really think that there's work that we have to do. I want our public safety officers to have the resources that they need to keep the public safe. The jungle's getting pretty bad these days, and if you're going in there, I think you need adequate protection. In addition to other ways to amend that situation, such as we've had a real decrease over the past years in state-run mental health facilities and where those folks to go. So this is one of those wicked problems where it's complex and you can't address it just from one angle. I do believe very strongly that we have Bob talks about transparency, and we have some transparency goals here that we really need to address so we understand what's happening with policing. I'm glad that we now have a community board that's going to be reviewing some of the new data, because we haven't been tracking this. And when you're not tracking something and not following it, it can live in the dark. And we have to make sure that all people are treated equally by our law enforcement.
Okay, Bob?
I think the collaborative that the city and county engaged in under gubernatorial mandate to reform policing was, to a certain extent, an opportunity lost. There were things that they did in that report that they shouldn't have done, and things in the report that are lacking. And I know that I've talked to a number of people in Newfield and Enfield about the collaborative, and the opinion has been negative. The general opinion has been that the county should have written its own report, the city should have written its own report. You know, they regard it as an arranged marriage, as I told the legislature on the 30th of March, an arranged marriage that should never have happened because really it's two different problems. And in terms of opportunity lost, the biggest shortfall I saw was the lack of true accountability in that report. I think there should have been a zero tolerance policy against police violence, that when somebody suggests, wouldn't it be nice to plant evidence against this African-American defendant because I don't like him all that much. That police officer shouldn't have just been knocked down a rank and given a 30-day suspension. He should have been fired from the force. And the City of Ithaca Police Department didn't do that. It should have done that. I would like our county to establish a zero tolerance policy so that on our sheriff's department would never occur.
Okay. And Bob, you'll lead off with the answer to this next question, and it kind of plays off what you've just been talking about. Beyond the issue of public safety, within the county, the City of Ithaca is certainly the major player, and often city initiatives do require county collaboration. So in general, could you talk about that collaboration and maybe give us an example of an issue you support with the city and one perhaps other than the public safety initiative that you're less comfortable with?
Well, in terms of public safety, I can think of the SWAT truck and the SWAT team as the best example. That is a collaboration between the city and county. Having the SWAT team, which is partially staffed by the county, I think majority staffed by the City of Ithaca Police Department. And you're talking about an expensive vehicle. Thank goodness that the city and county did not decommission that SWAT truck. That SWAT truck saves lives. If we ever had an active shooter situation at one of our stores or in one of the college campuses or wherever, hope it never happens. But if it ever did, we would need that vehicle as a first line of protection, as a staging vehicle for the police to use. And Sheriff Osborne supports keeping that SWAT vehicle in the possession of the city and county. Unfortunately, the city's worst instincts were not realized, and that vehicle will be repainted, will be made less offensive to some, but will still be available for law enforcement to use. Thank goodness that's the case. We can collaborate on a lot of things. We can collaborate on development. We can collaborate sometimes on encouraging environmental protection. But I think the biggest thing we're collaborating on right now is that issue of safety and the issue of policing.
Okay. Vanessa?
There we go. Now I'm not muted. Right. So public and city county collaboration. So one of the really important aspects these days in that regard is public transportation. So it's not even just a county city collaboration. It's also involving nonprofit, private sector as well. And when you bring in some of our educational organizations. We have got to do better by our district in terms of access to public transportation. I've talked to several residents in our district about they're interested in new job opportunities that are beginning to come back online, and yet the routes are not really and the times of day are just not really working. You're not going to be able to get to work several hours before your job starts if you've ridden the public bus because of lack of coverage, and it's improving. But the coverage is just really not there. And so that's something that I think that, the city and the county need to continue to work on. I'm actively building relationships both across the county legislature and the city to try to have that background in order to work together. I completed the 2018 Leadership Tompkins year-long program where I've met many people active in the city level and the county. And let's see, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But it has to do with just keeping active, investing in those individual relationships so that the trust is there for finding commonality on the issues that you care about, such as public transportation.
Okay, let's turn our attention to vaccinations. We're currently ranked 5th nationally in vaccination rate. And I'm wondering if you have supported all the local efforts so far. And if so, at this point, how would you encourage and enable people who've not yet been vaccinated to do so? And Vanessa, that's yours.
I'm really proud of how we've done as a community in terms of allowing people to have transportation to the sites, the running of those sites. One area for improvement next time, I think, could be, we didn't have lots of rural locations for vaccine testing and for COVID testing and vaccination until kind of late in the game. And that was a missed opportunity there, to be sure. Always, hindsight being 2020, you can look back and find things that you can improve, but our city and county administrators and our legislature should really be applauded for the full court press and getting us to this national position of having such a high vaccination rate. Other places are not this lucky. What I am really motivated now to do in terms of vaccination is to get our kids vaccinated. We've got school happening in the fall, and we have an open date for school, but we don't have a date for the students under 12 years of age to get vaccinated. We've got to work really strongly together with the pediatricians. Parents are willing to take the vaccine themselves, and there's another level of hesitation when you start thinking about your child. And we've got to instill our trusted community members, the leadership voices that parents trust, to get the word out that this is what we need to do to keep protecting our community.
Thank you. Bob.
First thing I want to do is give a shout out to Public Health Director Frank Krupa, to ex-County Administrator Jason Molino, to Amy Hendricks, to a whole group of people, too numerous to mention, and mostly to the line item nurses and contact tracers who have done such an excellent job to lead our effort here in Tompkins County. Thanks to Cayuga Medical Center too for having that vaccination site up at the mall and the testing sites that I talked about previously. Yes, I worked along with people like Dryden's Mike Lane to establish that vaccine registry so that we could give peace of mind to people and give that little nudge to people to actually go get vaccinated. I think right now where we stand in June 2021 is we have to make sure people know that the vaccine is not political. It is not Joe Biden's vaccine any more than it is Donald Trump's vaccine. It is not something that will hurt you. It is something that will help you. And the sooner we get everybody vaccinated, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, independents, conspiracy theorists, I don't care. The sooner we get everybody vaccinated, the sooner we can get on with our life and stop living our life under the bed, because we can't live it that way much longer. Thank you.
Thanks. And Bob, it's your turn to lead off with the next question. Most rural homeowners get their water from wells. How should we go about protecting our rural water supply? And should that include considering municipal water and sewer systems in Enfield and Newfield?
Well, I believe Newfield does have a municipal water system. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that is part of their public works department because they have a larger centralized hamlet. I don't really see a public water supply in Enfield working out. I think, the cost of a water treatment plant would be exorbitant, I should say, compared to the benefit. It would have to run pipes so long, and I just don't think there'd be an economic case made for it. What we have to do is protect our water supply. Now, fortunately, we in Enfield have a water protection committee. The Water Protection Committee has even come up with a draft water protection law. I would like to see that nurtured by the Enfield Planning Board. I'd like to see our planning board go over that line by line and make sure it's something that the planning board supports, and maybe we can then adopt it. So I think it's protecting the water from the wells. I have some of the best tasting water I have ever drunk. I don't know what it is. It clogs my coffee pot, but it darn tastes good. And I'm going to take a swig of it right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Vanessa?
It's a great cue for a water break, Bob. You're making me thirsty over here. Yeah, so the water, the aquifer study for, cheers. The aquifer study from Enfield came back with some good results for what we've got. There's some concerns about methane at some levels, but we know that about 700 homes in Enfield do maintain their water from the wells, and we've got the fracking ban in place. So I think we've done the work there to maintain that. When we think about water in District 8, what I am more interested in looking at moving forward is looking at the investments in infrastructure for our waterways and making sure that our roads and our bridges are protected. Because as we think about climate impacts, we're not in a bad location here in the Finger Lakes in terms of, desert, drought, river flooding, severe heat. We're actually kind of nicely positioned in order to, we may be hosting climate migrants here moving forward. But one of the impacts that we are vulnerable to is severe water events. And so we need to really be looking at what is the infrastructure that maybe some of the new infrastructure dollars may afford. And certainly the American Rescue Plan is eligible to advance our investments in our aging waterway protection infrastructure.
Thank you. Our next question, how would you foster greater public involvement in civic activities and community service? Vanessa?
One of the things that's so wonderful about rural living is that everything that you see around you, parks, libraries, activities at the fire hall, you know, they're put on because people love their community and they want to come together for it. So that's just one of the wonderful things about being in a rural community, and that I value so much. I've been very active on our library board here in Newfield, and in starting to establish the music series at Mill Park a few years ago, because I really believe in those conversations with your neighbor that you have over a basket of mozzarella sticks from the food truck that came to the event. So there's a lot of promise and potential for new activities like that. On the Newfield side of the line, it's the Activities and History Center. On the Enfield side of the line, it's this wonderful new community center, activities for seniors who are telling me they're really suffering from isolation. We've been getting to know each other via Zoom for so many months now, but if you're not a computer native, that can be very isolating. So opportunities with the new community center, getting the word out about that, developing that local library. I mentioned I'm a mom. I may have a visit from a young one here in a second, peeking his head in the door. And that skate and bike park. I've got lots of ideas of how we might fund that, working with the Park Foundation, working with the Community Foundation. Hi, this is my son. My time's running out. Thank you for the water. And other funding sources to get people excited and make that happen.
Thanks, Bob.
Yes, the failings of Zoom. Last debate, it was my cute cat, and in this case, it's Vanessa's cute kid. In any event, in terms of community involvement, I'll focus on one thing, and that is something that it kind of touches a nerve with me, and that is the lack of a political contest in too many races. Let's focus on the county legislature. As I count them, as many as 8 incumbent members of the Tompkins County Legislature this year will cruise to re-election without even a symbolic opponent, not in the primary, not in the general election. They will be coronated to new 4-year terms, and they will not be tested. They will not be challenged. They will not be forced to go out as Vanessa and I have to go out and knock on doors and meet people and explain ourselves and sell ourselves to them. I am so appreciative that Vanessa entered this race. I'm also appreciative that Randy Brown, the Republican, entered the race for the fall. It makes us better. It sharpens our intellect. It lets us think the issues through and say, am I doing the right thing? Am I talking the right advocacy? Am I suggesting the right thing for this community? And we get feedback from the voters. Why can't they? I wish all of these races were challenged. When I was covering the Board of Representatives in 1970, these races were challenged every 4 years. There was competition. Now there isn't. Political apathy is a real problem.
Okay. Bob, you'll lead off the next answer. If you're elected, you'll have a lot of balls in the air. Taxes, expenditures, the local economy, climate change, social justice, rural development, to name just a few. Where are your priorities?
Fortunately, at the county level, you have a good, competent staff. You have Rick Snyder, the finance director. You have Katie Borgella, the planning commissioner. You have lots of good people. We've got to have some new faces in the finance department, in the administration unit, because our key budget people have left. Jason Molino has departed as county administrator, and Kevin McGuire, his right-hand man in terms of budget crunching, he's leaving this summer. So we have some shoes to fill in that department. But in terms of my priorities, one of the things I am concerned about is the downtown facilities project. Just to get you up to speed, 2 years ago, the county legislature bought a lot of land on North Tioga Street for $1.8 million, planning to put a new office building there. With construction and renovation, it would cost over $20 million. That hasn't moved in 2 years for reasons that I may go into in another response. But it's bothered me that we got to spend that kind of money. I think we need to make a business case before we start moving shovels on that project. Do we really need a new office building that will cost 10 times the amount of our annual Enfield town budget? I question that. And I would love to sit on the Downtown Facilities Committee of the county legislature and try to iron out those problems.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Well, first of all, right back at you, Bob. I do find I have to agree that running the race with somebody else does make someone a better candidate and forces you to really get out there and think about the issues more than we each would without the other. And so I thank you too. What are my priorities at the county legislature? There are a lot of issues. My priorities are climate adaptation and social justice. I think many of these other issues fade into the background if we are having an uninhabitable planet. And there's the risk of moving forward without keeping a social equity lens with those changes that advances and exacerbates the same old problems we've been talking about with public safety and with public justice. So as we talk about with water here, we were talking about water a minute ago. You know, I've been working with some residents in mobile home parks where they're having trouble with their water. And we just have to make sure that all people are treated fairly as we make the necessary changes to adapt to our changing climate and to climate energy. And that's why I have a green campaign with green signs, with these wooden signs that volunteers are excited to jump on board and get around the district, because plastic waste mitigation is another problem that we have to keep our eye on. I would like to come back to the transparency issue with the downtown. I'd like to return to that answer.
Next up, Vanessa, I believe you also have the Working Families Party endorsement. And Bob, I believe you've circulated petitions to run as an independent.
I have.
Is it fair to say that regardless of the outcome of the upcoming Democratic primary, you'll both be on the ballot in November? And Vanessa, you're up.
First, yeah. So I hope and intend to carry the Democratic nomination after June 22nd. Everybody get out and vote. Early voting has already started. Tuesday, June 22nd is our primary day. However, if I don't carry the day, I will not be continuing in this race past June 22nd. I'd like to use my remaining time to address the issue about the transparency of the county legislature. Our sunshine laws in New York State are rather explicit. I don't know the situation, just as Bob is saying, there's been some executive sessions, but I have to question if we were in that meeting and making the decision to follow the letter of the law and go to executive session, if we would feel that were justified. We're just making these speculations based on incomplete information.
Okay. Bob.
Could you repeat that question for me, please?
Yeah, is it fair to say that regardless of the outcome of the primary, you'll be on the ballot in November?
There is a terrible flaw in New York's election law, and it's something that I think the political parties like, but that the voters do not. We have so many more independents these days. I go to what I call blended households over and over and over in Newfield and Enfield, where one member is a Democrat and one member is an independent or a Republican. And why should, in Democratic primaries, only Democrats be able to vote? We ought to have what they have in California, which is a jungle primary, which means in the June primary, all the voters get to decide among all the candidates, and the top two people finish. They go on to November in the general election, so that Randy Brown would compete in the primary, all right? And Vanessa and I would, and the top two would then go on to November. That's fair, and everybody gets to vote, the Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I would like to see that. Until that happens, I have to adapt to the fact that we have so many blended households. And so many people have said, Bob, I want to vote for you. Well, I'm sorry, you can't vote on June 22nd in the Democratic primary because you're an independent or you're a Republican. And so this gives them an opportunity to consider me in the fall. And I would certainly encourage Vanessa to continue as a working families nominee if she chose to.
Okay, thank you. Our last question is something of a wild card. We've covered a lot of territory here this evening, but it's likely there's something that's important to you that you didn't get a chance to talk about. So what question do you wish I had asked? Bob?
What question? I guess it relates to the transparency issue, which Vanessa had brought up, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart. The county legislature has increasingly, over the course of the last several years, done less in the open sunlight of transparency. Regarding downtown facilities, remember I said they bought the land on which the new office building would sit. They bought it in April 2019. It closed in December 2019, sold for $1.8 million. Yet the Downtown Facilities Committee of the legislature continues to have meetings, and the county legislature continues to have executive sessions where in executive session, behind closed doors, the question of real estate transactions is considered. Now, there may be a legitimate reason for it, but we are not told. Back in October of 2019, I asked legislator Ann Corman after one of the Enfield Town Board meetings, can we please have then legislature chair Martha Robertson come up and say what you're deciding, what you're discussing in an executive session of the legislature? And said, yeah, well, I'll make sure that Martha says something. Well, it never happened. And so here it is, 2 years later, those meetings go on, those executive sessions go on, and we are kept in the dark. We, the citizens of the county, that ought to stop.
Okay. Thank you. Vanessa?
Thank you. This is a fun question, and I am going to choose to use my time to talk about training for green jobs. So as you get the opportunity to see the tiny powerhouse is going around, it was in our district a few weeks ago, and then it was up in Dryden this past weekend. You get the opportunity to meet the folks from Get Your Greenback Tompkins and Heat Smart Tompkins and ask about what are the limiting factors? Why are we not having more green heating technologies such as ground source and air source heat pumps for more households in our county? The answer, the limiting factors are training and incentives for landlords. So what I want to talk about is training, because that's my professional expertise. I have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. And in the last teaching job that I had, this is exactly what I was doing, working with businesses that needed a skilled workforce in particular aspects of an emerging economy. In that case, it was engineering. Here, we're talking about green energy, working with the public school system to get those specific skills and knowledge that was identified, and then pipelining that to the local community colleges so that those employers were able to scale up and get that. And that's what I'm prepared to do for Tompkins County. I know how to do it and I'm ready.
Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of the discussion and it's time for closing statements. I arbitrarily had Vanessa lead off the opening statements, so we'll give Bob a chance to lead off the closing statements.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, the Democratic Party. And thank you, the voters who are listening to this. I encourage you to go to boblynchtompkins.com, my website, to learn more about my campaign and the issues that I think are important and the reasons I would like to be your next Tompkins County legislator in this grand Tompkins Southwest District. Straight talk. And I say straight talk because I admire the legendary and now departed John McCain, who was a hero of mine. And I actually, when I was a Republican way back when, I supported him in the 2000 Republican primary against George W. Bush. But straight talk. I had to agonize over running for this legislature seat. I didn't know whether I was ready to move on because the Enfield Town Board, people in Enfield so wanted me to continue on the Enfield Town Board. I'm called the voice of moderation on the board by some. And on the board, I had to consider, well, if I'm going to be on the county legislature, I'm going to have to resign my board seat upon election. And do I really want to do that? And I had to think about it long and hard. And then I was said to myself, you know, if you don't do it, you're always going to ask yourself, what if? And then I went out there and I met so many new friends in Newfield in the course of this campaign. It is a joy to meet new friends every day in my campaign, hundreds of them. And I am so enthused about this, win or lose. If I lose, then I'll go back to representing the Enfield Town Board for 2 more years. If I win, I hope I can be your servant, your trusted, humble servant on the Tompkins County Legislature. I seek to fill some big shoes, and I will try to do my best, the failed person that I may be at times, but I'll try to do my best. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vanessa, your turn to wrap it up.
Thank you. I'm smiling because it's such an honor to be here with you guys, and I'm a first-time candidate, and this is just very rewarding and very exciting to be here. So thank you to the Enfield Democratic Committee, to the Sadovniks, to Dave and Ted for putting on this forum. It's been a pleasure. Enfield, if you feel the moment of opportunity that I do for getting more things done right, then join me in choosing a path for our district that will seek divergent viewpoints and recognize that we go farther when we go together. I'm part of a working family. I know the struggles, how the pandemic's affected me and my family, who were raising our family here. If you want me to work for you, then I need votes at the primary. Gather your fellow Democrats and make sure everybody gets to the polls. Early voting is already started. It's available tomorrow, Monday, 9 to 5 at East Buffalo Street. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 5. Tuesday and Thursday, 9 to 8 p.m. They're also open Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Reach out to me if you'd like a ride to the polls, no matter who you're voting for, of course. Reach out if you're willing to post a sign in your yard or on your property and to get people to vote. You can contact me at the website vanessa4tompkins.org. That's Vanessa, the number 4tompkins.org. Elections matter every day. I'm the right candidate at the right time, and I'm here to work for you. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank the same group of people again, our timer, Mark, Ted behind the scenes, and the Enfield Democratic Committee for making this happen. And I want to echo Vanessa's reminder about voting. Early voting has started at the Board of Elections downtown, and we can all go to the polls a week from Tuesday, June 22nd, to cast our votes for our 8th Legislative District representative. So thanks to all the people who've tuned in tonight, and I hope you found it informative and helped you make a tough decision. Thank you.
Thank you.